A quiet, bookish woman faces a necessary gynecological surgery. To her disbelief, her assigned doctor turns out to be a young, charismatic millionaire, and their lives become entangled in a way neither expected. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. The waiting area at Orchard Hill Medical Center in Maplebridge smelled faintly of antiseptic and freshly brewed coffee. Lilith Endface, 27, sat in the far corner, her knees together, fingers knotted in her lap, thumbs rubbing in anxious circles. Her slim frame trembled as her legs bounced slightly, nerves gnawing away at her composure. She had postponed this procedure for years. Her condition had worsened, and while the dull ache in her abdomen had become routine, the idea of letting someone, especially a man, touch her again stirred up deep-rooted fear. Her previous doctor had been clear. "This can't wait any longer," the woman had said with warm authority. Lilith was certain she had requested a female physician, triple-checked the box online. That's why, when the nurse called her name and added, "You'll be seeing Dr. Adrien West today," her heart slammed against her ribs like a warning bell. "Wait," Lilith stood abruptly, her voice sharp with panic. "Is he male?" The nurse, caught off guard, blinked. "Yes, Drive West is one of our leading specialists. Is there a concern?" Lilith took a shaky step backward, throat tightening. "I scheduled with a woman," she whispered. "I understand," the nurse said kindly, her tone apologetic. "There may have been a last-minute change, but I assure you, Drive West is highly respected. He's worked with many women who came in just as anxious." Lilith hesitated. Her abdomen pulsed with dull pain, yet it wasn't enough to silence the alarm in her head. Her eyes shifted toward the closed exam room door. Her breath came faster. "I don't like being touched," she murmured. The nurse softened. "That's okay. You are in control here. Nothing happens without your permission. If you change your mind at any point, we stop." Lilith nodded stiffly, her limbs moving against her instincts. With each step down the hallway, she felt like she was walking straight into the shadow of a memory she had spent a decade trying to forget. Inside the room, the air was cold and sterile. Lilith changed into the exam gown, hugging her arms tightly across her chest as she perched on the edge of the table, her breath shallow and uneven. A soft knock interrupted the silence. "Ms. Endface? May I come in?" She didn't answer. The door opened slowly. Dr. Adrien West, 30, entered with a clipboard in hand. He was tall, with a calm presence and kind hazel eyes that held no judgment. His voice was low, steady. "Hi, Lilith. I'm Drive West. I heard there was a mix-up in the schedule. If you're feeling uncomfortable, we can absolutely reschedule or stop at any time. You're in full control." Lilith avoided eye contact. "Just do it," she muttered. Adrien nodded, respectful of her tone. "All right. I'll explain each step before I proceed, okay?" She gave a faint nod. He began asking routine questions, his demeanor professional but kind, his words designed to ease rather than invade. She responded quietly, her fingers toying with the hem of the gown. When it was time for the physical exam, Adrien maintained a respectful distance as he explained every action. "I'm going to examine your lower abdomen now. Let me know the moment you feel anything uncomfortable." His touch was light, measured, as he started at the outer edges of the area. But Lilith's body remained stiff beneath his hands, her muscles locked in fear. As he moved closer to the pelvic region, still outside the gown, his fingers accidentally grazed too near her inner thigh. Her body reacted instantly. "Don't touch me," she screamed, lurching backward and smacking his hand away. The stirrups clanged against the metal table as she pushed herself off with explosive force. Adrien immediately stepped back, hands raised. "I'm sorry." But Lilith was already clutching the gown to her chest, her eyes brimming with tears. "Do you even realize what you did?" she shouted. "Just because you wear a white coat doesn't mean you can do whatever you want." "Lilith, please," Adrien began, but she was already reaching for the door. "Stay away from me. Don't come after me. Just leave me alone." Lilith flung the door open and bolted barefoot down the corridor, her tears streaking across flushed cheeks. A nurse called after her, but she didn't stop. Adrien remained frozen, stunned. His hands, still raised from instinct, slowly dropped to his sides. The room felt impossibly still. He had no idea what had just happened, but he knew something deeper than the moment had been triggered. Meanwhile, Lilith stumbled into the lobby, her coat slipping off her shoulders. She collapsed outside the clinic door, back pressed against the cold brick wall. Her body curled inward, arms wrapping tight around herself as if to keep from shattering. Tears poured freely now, raw, wild, uncontrollable. She thought she was ready. Thought she had healed enough. But one accidental touch, even in a clinical setting, had sent her spiraling into a place she thought she'd left behind. She wasn't 27 in that moment. She was 15 again. 15. Awkward, shy, still learning her body. It had been a routine health screening at her high school in Maplebridge. The gym was lined with makeshift privacy partitions, students giggling as they waited their turn. When her name was called, she stepped behind the curtain to find a middle-aged male doctor with a fixed, too-wide smile. At first, it was normal blood pressure, reflexes, but then his touches lingered. His comments blurred the line between clinical and personal. He leaned in too close, said things about her developing well, brushed against her chest. His breath had reeked of coffee and mint. Frozen in confusion, Lilith hadn't moved until she fled. She told her teacher. The nurse. Her mom. No one believed her. Lilith, are you making something out of nothing again? He's been part of this program for years. He's completely professional. Her classmates were worse. She just wanted attention. She probably misread it. Always so dramatic. Lilith had learned then, sometimes the truth didn't matter. Not when no one wanted to hear it. After that, she stopped speaking up. No more sleepovers. No more field trips. Her world shrank down to silence, a silence she wore like armor. Even a decade later, the silence still clung. She dragged herself from the sidewalk and made it home, where she splashed cold water on her face. In the mirror, her reflection stared back, older, yes, but not stronger. The trembling hadn't stopped. Her skin still crawled. And she hated that one well-intentioned doctor had cracked something inside her. Even if Adrien hadn't meant any harm, her body didn't care. It remembered. She spent the next few days tucked into the familiar comfort of her apartment. When she wasn't in bed, she was curled up in her reading nook, books stacked high, tea gone cold. By the third morning, something stirred in her chest. The pain in her abdomen hadn't disappeared. Avoidance wouldn't cure her. She got dressed, grabbed her tote, and returned to her workplace, the Hearthlight bookshop and cafe, a place that always felt a little like sanctuary. Sunlight streamed in through the dusty windows as she opened the shop. The scent of old pages, peppermint tea, and baked pastries filled the air. Lilith, still feeling like a cracked version of herself, turned on her favorite soft jazz playlist and began arranging bookmarks behind the counter. The familiar rhythm soothed her. Shelves creaking under the weight of forgotten stories. The bell above the door chiming gently as the first customers trickled in. Then the bell rang again. And this time her spine stiffened. She didn't need to look. She knew that voice. "Excuse me," came a calm, tentative tone. She turned slowly. Standing at the center of the shop was Dr. Adrien West. No lab coat in sight. Just jeans, a navy peacoat, and a hopeful expression. "I didn't realize you worked here," he said, holding a small leather notebook. His eyes were apologetic, unsure. Lilith's fingers curled around the edge of the counter. "Are you following me?" "No," he said quickly. "I swear. My mom just had surgery and loves old books. I thought this place might have something special for her." Lilith looked away, the muscles in her jaw tightening. Adrien took a cautious step forward. "I just wanted to say," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I'm sorry for what happened at the clinic. I never wanted to make you uncomfortable. If I crossed a line—" "You didn't," she cut in, her tone sharp. He fell silent. "I know you didn't mean to," she continued, "but that doesn't change how it felt." Adrien nodded slowly. "I understand. Truly." The bookshop suddenly felt much smaller, the air thicker. "I'm not here as a doctor," he added. "Just as someone who wishes you hadn't felt unsafe." That wasn't fair. For the first time, Lilith looked at him, really looked at him. He didn't look polished or like the heir to a medical empire. He looked tired. Real. "I don't need pity from a doctor," she said flatly. "I'm not offering pity," he replied gently. "I'm offering understanding." Lilith stepped past him without another word, heading for the back shelves. By the time she returned to the counter, Adrien was gone. 3 days later, Lilith wandered through Maplebridge Central Park on her lunch break. A warm paper cup from Fern and Foyle Coffee House rested in her hands as she followed a winding path lined with golden leaves. She made her way to her favorite bench by the duck pond, the one spot in town where her thoughts could breathe. She had just sat down when a startled cry rang out. Across the path, an older woman had tripped over a broken patch of pavement. Her tote bag had spilled. Books and papers scattered across the walkway. Before Lilith could react, someone else had already reached her. Adrien. He crouched beside the woman, checking her knee and murmuring soft reassurances. Then he made a call, probably to her daughter, before helping gather the fallen books and offering his own coat. Lilith watched from behind a nearby tree, unseen. He wasn't in scrubs. He wasn't performing for anyone. He just helped. The woman clutched his hand gratefully, whispering something that made Adrien smile. He stayed with her until a younger woman arrived, thanked him, and led the elder away. Adrien gave a small wave and walked off, tucking his hands into his pockets, disappearing into the trees. Lilith stayed behind, heart oddly heavy. That image, him kneeling in the dirt, offering warmth with no expectation, stuck in her mind long after he was gone. That evening she stayed late at the bookshop, sorting a donation of vintage poetry collections. She lost track of time until the clock blinked past closing. The streets outside were empty when she locked up. Her phone battery flashed red. She pulled her scarf tight and decided regretfully to take the shortcut through the alley. The alley was darker than she remembered. Her boots echoed with each step. Then she heard it, footsteps perfectly matched to hers. She glanced back. A man in a dark hoodie followed at a steady pace, hands buried in his pockets. Her stomach flipped. She quickened her pace. So did he. She turned a corner, deserted. Her fingers fumbled for her phone, but the screen remained dark. Dead. Hey! The man called. She ignored him. Hey! He said again, louder now. Lilith broke into a run. He lunged, grabbing her arm. Don't run from me, sweetheart. Her scream echoed off the brick. She twisted free, her bag crashing to the ground. He reached for her again, until headlights flooded the alley. Car screeched to a halt. Hey! Came a voice, deep, furious. Adrien. He jumped from the car, sprinting toward them. Without hesitation, he shoved the man back and stepped between them, fists clenched. Walk away. Now. The man cursed and disappeared into the dark. Lilith collapsed to her knees, shaking uncontrollably. Adrien knelt beside her, his movements calm, precise. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice low. She couldn't speak. Her hands were clenched in her coat like she was holding herself together by force. Gently, Adrien brushed a strand of hair from her face. You're safe now. I've got you. She met his gaze. Steady, fierce, sincere. She gave a small, shaky nod. He helped her to her feet, collected her scattered things, and guided her to the passenger seat of his car. She didn't resist. Inside, he handed her a water bottle. Take a few sips. She obeyed. Her hands still trembled, but her breath began to slow. I was heading home from the hospital, Adrien said softly. Took a different route tonight. I'm beyond relieved I did. She found her voice at last. Thank you. You don't have to, he said gently. I just wish it hadn't happened. The rest of the drive was quiet, her heart slowly returning to rhythm. When they arrived at her apartment, Adrien insisted on walking her upstairs. She didn't argue. Inside, she dropped onto the couch, too drained to pretend anymore. Adrien knelt in front of her and gently took her hand, inspecting a small scrape. It's not deep, he murmured, dabbing it with antiseptic. But it'll sting. She didn't flinch. And that's when it hit her, he was touching her skin. Not a doctor. Not a stranger. Just Adrien. And she wasn't afraid. You're good at this, she whispered. He looked up with a tired smile. Patch jobs? Or bad timing? She managed a faint smile. Both. He helped her settle beneath the blanket and sat across the room in her old armchair, reading while she drifted off. Before sleep took her, she looked at him once more. For so long, fear had shaped her life. But tonight, someone had stayed, not to fix, not to rescue, but simply to be there. And that changed everything. The next morning, she texted him. Thanks again. For everything. Anytime. Always, he replied. Their texts became more frequent after that. Light, never too personal, book recommendations, inside jokes, small talk about life in Maplebridge. And for the first time in years, Lilith didn't feel completely alone. The following week, an early frost swept through town. At the Hearthlight bookshop, Lilith was adjusting a window display when her coworker Jasmine called out from the register. Lil, you might want to check this. She walked over, brushing glitter off her hands. On the shop's small TV, the local morning news was on. Today on Profiles in Progress, the anchor announced, we spotlight Dr. Adrien West, at 30, one of the youngest medical leaders in the country, and head of women's health at Orchard Hill Medical Center, funded by the powerful West Family Foundation. The screen showed Adrien's smiling face in scrubs, posing outside the hospital. His name appeared in bold beneath. Dr. Adrien West, medical director and philanthropist. Lilith stared. The segment continued with clips of ribbon-cutting ceremonies, fundraising galas, research breakthroughs, all backed by the West Family Healthcare Trust, with Adrien shaking hands with political figures and global health leaders. Jasmine blinked. Wait. Isn't that the guy who helped you that night? Isn't he, like, your doctor? Lilith didn't answer. That evening, alone in her apartment, she sat at her laptop scrolling through article after article. Adrien wasn't just a kind doctor. He was that doctor. Heir to a medical empire. Son of Gregory West, billionaire founder. Born into wealth shaped by influence. But also, the man who showed up in an alley when she needed him most. She stared at photos of black-tie fundraisers, conference panels, and private hospitals. He hadn't said a word about any of this. He drove a basic sedan. He wore jeans. He read vintage poetry. He cared that wasn't fake. But still, the knot in her stomach wouldn't loosen. Was it all just some noble image? A way to feel good about saving the broken. The next time she saw him was at Fern and Foyle, the cafe near the hospital. Adrien stood in line, flipping through a notebook. Lilith approached without hesitation, her heart pounding in her chest. Adrien. He turned, surprised, then smiled. Hey, Lilith. Who are you? She interrupted, her voice low but intense. His expression shifted. I saw the segment, she said. The interviews. The empire. The dynasty. He exhaled slowly. So, you found out. You're not just some kind doctor, she continued. You're that doctor. The Adrien West. He nodded slightly. My father built the foundation. I grew up surrounded by hospitals and boardrooms. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning? Her tone sharpened. What was the plan? Be the humble, sweet guy so the broken bookstore girl would open up to you. Adrien's face didn't flinch. He didn't get defensive. No, he said plainly. I didn't tell you because I didn't want that to be the first thing you saw. Lilith folded her arms, her guard going back up. So which one are you? The man who shows up at galas, or the one who helped me that night? Adrien glanced toward a nearby bench. Can we sit? She followed reluctantly. Once seated, Adrien looked down at his hands. Lilith, I grew up with everything, money, access, expectations. But I also grew up with distance. A father who taught me strategy before kindness. A mother who threw charity galas but couldn't attend a single school event. He paused before continuing. I chose medicine because it's the only place I felt real. And when I started working in women's health, I saw how many women walk through life carrying shame and silence. I wanted to be part of undoing that. He turned to face her. I never pretended to be someone else. I just didn't want a name to come between us. She studied him, no PR mask, no perfect speech. Just quiet sincerity. I don't trust people like you, she said. People who've never had to fight for anything. Adrien gave a small smile. You'd be surprised. But I get it. They sat in thoughtful silence for a while. Finally, she asked, why me? He didn't even blink. Because you see through me. You challenge me. And the day you ran from that exam room, I saw someone stronger than anyone I've ever known. Lilith looked away, her throat tight. Maybe it wasn't about status. Maybe it was about how he made her feel seen, respected, not pitted. She nodded slightly, allowing herself, for the first time, to believe he might be genuine. The breeze carried a hint of spring, but Lilith didn't feel comforted by it. The pain in her abdomen had returned. Worse now. Sharper. Persistent. She had tried ignoring it, distracting herself with books. With Adrien. But she knew the truth. The diagnosis had been clear. Without surgery, her condition could deteriorate. Fear had kept her frozen for years. The thought of being unconscious, vulnerable on a table again, it still terrified her. But something was different now. A few days later, she stood in front of the gleaming glass doors of Orchard Hill Medical Center, clutching her canvas bag, heart thudding. This time she walked inside. The receptionist smiled as Lilith stepped up to the counter. Can I help you? I need to speak to Dr. Adrien West, she said clearly. Do you have an appointment? No, Lilith replied. But he knows me. Please just tell him it's Lilith Endface. 10 minutes later, Adrien appeared in the hallway, his expression shifting from surprise to concern the moment he saw her. Lilith, he said gently. Is everything okay? She took a breath. I need the surgery. His eyebrows lifted slightly. And I want you to be the one to do it. Adrien blinked, taken aback. Are you sure? She nodded. I've thought about it. I tried to avoid it, but I know it needs to happen. And I trust you." His eyes softened with something close to awe. "You have no idea what that means." The days that followed were filled with a strange balance of calm and anxiety. But Lilith no longer felt ruled by fear. Adrien explained every step thoroughly, gave her space when needed, never rushed, never minimized. He didn't treat her like a case, he treated her like a person. The night before the surgery, Adrien visited Lilith in her hospital room. The 4 was already in her arm, the sterile gown hanging loosely around her shoulders. She sat near the window watching the city lights shimmer over Maplebridge. "I won't ask if you're nervous," Adrien said gently. "I am," she admitted. "But less than I thought I'd be." He sat down beside her. "Do you want me to go over the details again?" "No," she turned to him, eyes glassy but steady. "I just want you to know something." He waited. "I don't let people close. I never have. Something in me broke a long time ago. And for years I thought it meant I was beyond repair." Adrien didn't interrupt, his jaw tense with quiet emotion. "But you never forced anything. You never pushed. You just waited. You listened. And somehow, without even trying, you became the first person I've trusted in years." Her voice trembled. "I don't trust doctors. I don't trust men. I don't even trust myself half the time. But I trust you." Adrien covered her hand with his. "And I promise I won't break that." The surgical team at Orchard Hill Medical Center prepped early the next morning. Adrien scrubbed in with practiced precision, but something in his chest was heavier than usual. He'd done this procedure countless times. But this time, the woman on the table wasn't just a patient. She was Lilith. He owed her more than technical skill, he owed her trust. Every movement was exact, every instruction clear. Adrien's tone remained calm, focused, and unwavering as the hours passed. He barely noticed the clock. His entire being was centered on doing right by her. When the final stitch was placed, he pulled off his gloves and released a slow breath. Everything went perfectly, he told the team. But he didn't leave right away. He stood at the foot of the bed in recovery, watching the rise and fall of Lilith's chest. Pale, fragile, but safe. When she stirred hours later, his voice was the first thing she heard. "Hey," he said softly, eyes warm. "Welcome back." She blinked slowly. "Did it work?" "It did," he nodded. "You're going to be just fine." Tears slipped down her cheeks, relief more than pain. "I did it," she whispered. "You did?" Adrien replied, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You were unbelievably brave." She closed her eyes, letting his voice settle into her heart. In that room, filled with quiet monitors and antiseptic air, something inside her shifted. The fear wasn't gone, but it no longer ruled her. For the first time in years, she wasn't surviving. She was healing. The following days passed in a soft blur of rest and slow recovery. Adrien visited often, not as a physician, but as someone who simply cared. He brought her books, her favorite tea. He sat with her as she read, sometimes without speaking at all. And the silence between them was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with ease. There was something gentle growing between them, unspoken, warm, and real. Lilith began to feel lighter, not only in her body but in her soul. The girl who once flinched at kindness now smiled when Adrien walked into the room. But the outside world wasn't always as kind. After her final checkup, while Adrien filled out discharge paperwork, Lilith wandered the hospital corridor to stretch her legs. She paused near the nurse's lounge, unnoticed by the group chatting inside. "She's still hanging around?" one nurse said with an edge to her voice. "You mean that girl Drive West operated on?" another replied. "Yeah. I see her name pop up a lot," the first one snorted. "Wouldn't you stick around if you had a millionaire surgeon doting on you?" Laughter followed. "She's just damaged. Someone he feels sorry for. She's not his type, he's way out of her league." Lilith froze. Their voices echoed like pins against her ribs. She turned slowly and walked away, heart pounding. Their words followed her like a shadow, tiny, cutting, cruel. Lilith didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table with a mug of untouched chamomile tea, staring at a note she had written again and again until it felt right. The final version sat in front of her, scrawled on a small piece of paper. "I'm grateful for everything. But it's time for me to go. You deserve someone whole. Someone strong. Not someone you had to fix. Please don't look for me." She placed it on the windowsill where Adrien would find it the next time he visited, then quietly packed a small bag and slipped out into the night. The next morning, Adrien arrived with 2 coffees and a vintage book he thought she'd love. He knocked. No answer. He used the spare key she had nervously handed him weeks ago. The apartment was still. Empty. Then he saw the note. His heart sank. He called her. No reply. He called the shop. Jasmine told him Lilith had requested some time off. A silent panic clawed at his chest as he searched Maplebridge parks, cafes, bookstore corners, anywhere she might have gone. Nothing. Until hours later, a memory came rushing back. Adrien drove to the park, the one with the pond, where he had helped the elderly woman, where Lilith had once watched him from the shadows. And there she was, curled on a bench, knees pulled to her chest, eyes red and puffy, her face half hidden in the folds of her coat. She didn't look up when he approached, but she didn't move away either. He sat beside her in silence, letting the wind speak first. After a long pause, he said quietly, "You didn't even give me the chance to fight for you." Lilith wiped her cheek with her sleeve. "You shouldn't have to." His voice broke slightly. "Why do you keep believing your pain makes you less?" "Because it does," she whispered. "I'm the one with scars, the one who's afraid, the one who pushes people away. And you're Adrien West." Adrien didn't flinch. "I don't want easy, Lilith. I want honest. And you are the bravest person I've ever met." She shook her head, tears welling again. "You don't know what they're saying. The nurses, people at your hospital. They think I'm just some damaged girl clinging to a rich doctor." "I don't care what they say," he said firmly. "I care what you say. And right now all I hear is a voice that's been trained to doubt herself." He reached for her hand. "But I see you. Every part. And I choose you." Again and again. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. Her walls, paper-thin from the start, finally cracked. Adrien leaned closer. "You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be healed. You just have to be you. That's all I've ever wanted." She looked at him, her lips trembling. "I was so afraid." "So was I," he whispered, "until I met you." She leaned into him and he wrapped his arms around her like shelter. In that moment, the noise of the world faded away. 1 year later, the corner of Rose Avenue and Winslow Lane held something new. A small storefront with a hand-painted sign. The Hearthlight Bookshop and Cafe. Bread. Heal. Belong. Inside, the scent of brewed coffee and old pages mingled with warmth and laughter. Cozy chairs sat beneath wide windows. One corner featured a wall of handwritten notes, anonymous messages of hope and encouragement from visitor to visitor. Lilith stood behind the counter, serene, steady, changed. She still had moments. Still had shadows that crept in now and then. But now she had light to meet them with. Adrien had helped build the shop literally. He installed shelves, picked flooring, assembled every mismatched chair she loved. But he never took over. He still worked at Orchard Hill, still wore the white coat when needed. But with her, he was simply Adrien. They had taken their time. No pressure. No expectations. Just growth. When he finally proposed, he did it with a note slipped inside a first-edition copy of Jane Eyre. "You are no bird and I am no net. Let's fly together." And she said yes. The wedding was held on a quiet beach just outside Maplebridge. No reporters. No grand headlines. Just the ocean breeze, soft sand, and a circle of people who knew their story. Lilith wore a flowing dress of cream and lace. Her bare feet pressed into warm sand as she walked toward Adrien, who waited beneath a wooden arch wrapped in wildflowers. His smile was crooked, unguarded. They exchanged handwritten vows, raw, intimate. "I won't try to fix you," Adrien said. "Because you were never broken." "I won't run from love anymore," Lilith whispered. "Because you showed me love can be safe." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared, they stood hand in hand, quietly watching the tide come in. Lilith's veil lifted slightly in the breeze. She turned to him, her eyes shining. "Do you remember the first time you touched me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly. "I thought I'd never feel safe again," she said, a smile trembling at the corners of her lips. "But that moment when you touched me with nothing but honesty and care, that was the day I realized I didn't have to be afraid of the world anymore." Adrien gently pulled her into his arms. "And I realized," he murmured, "that love doesn't come from saving someone, it comes from standing beside them." They stayed like that, wrapped in each other and in the rhythm of the sea. The weeks and months that followed unfolded like chapters in their own story, mornings filled with shared coffee, evenings with open books, laughter that healed what medicine couldn't. The bookshop became a second home not just to them, but to dozens of others who wandered in off the street and found something they didn't know they needed. Lilith still had triggers. Still had moments when the shadows of the past knocked on the edges of her peace. But now she didn't face them alone. And Adrien? He no longer questioned whether his legacy would define him. Every time he walked into the hearthlight, he saw the only legacy that truly mattered, a space built from trust, courage, and the quiet strength of love. Lilith ran her fingers over the edge of the handwritten notes pinned to the wall, messages from women, survivors, dreamers. Some read. Still healing. Thank you for the space. I came in broken. I'm leaving with hope. That was her story too. And in the gentle chaos of it all, coffee brewing, pages turning, Adrien smiling across the room, she knew. They had created something lasting. In the end, it was never about being rescued. It was about choosing to live fully, honestly, together. If Lilith's story stirred something inside you, if you recognized even a fraction of yourself in her fear, her strength, her path toward healing, know this. You are not alone. And just like her, you are worthy of safety, of peace, of love. The kind that doesn't ask you to change who you are, only to believe that healing is possible. Even if it's quiet. Even if it takes time. Because courage doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like a girl walking back into a bookstore she almost never returned to. Or a woman saying yes. Not just to someone else, but finally to herself.